Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world today. Welcome to the Project Management Institute UK's webinar series. And before I start, I'd really like to give a big shout out to everyone that's joining us here today. We've got almost 200 people signed into this very webinar now, from actually a position of a record for PMI UK of 607 registered attendees. So I want to say a massive thank you to each and every one of you. But I also want to give a bit of a shout out to the places that people are joining us from today. We've got people from Germany, from Florida, lots of people from the UK, from Scotland and Manchester and Kent, Leeds and Wiltshire. So welcome everybody. So thank you so much for that. We've really got an exciting 60 minutes webinar coming up for you, and an additional 30 minutes of exclusive Q&A with our guest speaker today, Jeremy Cassell. So before we do any of that, I just want to go through an introduction to me. So my name's Nigel Smith. I'm Director of Volunteering here at PMI UK, and today I'm going to be your host. But before I go on and introduce Jeremy, I just want to go through a little bit of session housekeeping. Now, we actually want to bring today alive and bring the whole event right into your screen today and make it a real event. So if you could join us by dusting down your phone, getting on your tablet, or opening a new web browser page and heading over to menti.com. That's MENTI.com, and enter the code 1502035. That's 1502035. You will also see it at the top of your screens on the Menti slides. Your interaction is really going to bring this webinar to light. Now, there will be an opportunity for Q&A with Jeremy. We're going to take it at the end of the formal session, but please put your questions into the question box on Mentimeter, and you'll find it in the bottom of your screen. And you'll also be able to look at the other questions which have been coming in from other participants and upvote certain questions. And that gives us the opportunity to see the most popular things and ask the most relevant things of Jeremy at the end. Now, for any credentialing PMI members we have out there, this is going to give you one professional development leadership code in leadership, that will be given to you with a survey link towards the end of the presentation, and I'll be signposting you to where you can find that link later on. And of course, all the video, the slideware is going to be made available to you today in an exclusive email link to the email address that you registered with. So I mentioned that we're talking about influencing today, and what I'd like to do now is really just introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Jeremy Cassell. Now, personally, I'm really excited about this webinar. I'm delighted to have Jeremy here today. So what can I tell you about Jeremy? Well, he works with senior business leaders as a coach and trainer to ensure that they influence, present, communicate, and importantly, win more business with renewed confidence, increased knowledge, and authenticity. He's also the author of the C-Cubed Model of Influencing Field Guide and several other books, including Brilliant Selling, which has sold in excess of 70,000 copies and is available from all good bookshops really soon in its third edition in no less than 16 different languages. Now, Jeremy got married for the first time last year and has 3 teenage kids. So wow, what a year 2020 has been for Jeremy. Now, he currently lives in West Sussex, and his passions include golf, cricket, travel, and second-hand books. But not 70,000, I hope, Jeremy. Now, in October last year, he did create, design and deliver an individual video-based training program which focuses on the on the key elements of exceptional virtual presenting. And trust me, it is so much different to being in person. And here today as well, PMI have secured a really special deal for you on one of Jeremy's products, and we'll tell you more about that a little bit later. Now, this is Jeremy's first webinar with PMI UK, although I've known him for 6 months or so, and he has worked really closely with Merv, our esteemed leader at digital events, on several projects. And one other thing, it's actually Jeremy's birthday on Friday. So here's a shout out to you fellow Aquarians out there that have or will be celebrating your birthday soon. And with over 350 people in the audience today, I'm sure there's more than one person that shares today, or will share either today or Friday with Jeremy's birthday. So if it is, please let us know. Now, before I do hand over to Jeremy, he's asked me to take you through the agenda. And the one thing he did point out to me was to tell you, actually, do you know what? He's not, in fact, a project manager. So some of these timings may be totally askew, but he's going to take us through the current context and challenges that lie around influencing. He's also going to then introduce his C-cubed model, which is central to confidence, credibility, and connection. He's also going to give us some useful tips on voice patterns and touch on Robert Cialdini's principles of persuasion. But the one thing that is guaranteed, we are going to finish on time at 1 p.m. today, UK time. And before I do hand over to Jeremy, I just want to signpost everybody to the handout section in the GoToWebinar dashboard, where we've got a couple of handouts. One is Jeremy's influencing planner. The second are some PMI UK upcoming events. Please do reference those. So following on from that, I now just want to share, get Jeremy up as the presenter. And Jeremy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Nigel. According to a recent survey by Qualtrics, we spend 24 minutes in every hour in business trying to move people. Move as in persuade, influence, or change minds. It's a pretty extraordinary stat, isn't it? Something else I came across when I was thinking about what to include in this webinar is that a survey of 565 global employers by the Graduate Management Admission Council, that's GMAC, found that corporate recruiters ranked influencing skills ahead of teamwork, ahead of technical knowledge and leadership. In fact, respondents rated influencing skills ahead of managerial ability by a 2-to-1 margin. I asked you to complete a survey, and thank you so much to 103 people who have completed this survey. Of the 340 we now have attending this webinar, which is a fantastic number. Thanks for turning up, everyone. Really appreciate that. And I asked a simple question. I said, on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being not at all and 10 being absolutely critical, how important is influencing in your current role? And the average is 8.7. So I think we could probably conclude, therefore, that the key to successful leadership today is influencing, not authority. Now, how do you influence effectively? Do you need to become, I don't know, some sort of salesperson to influence? I don't, you know, I want to throw this open to you. So I'm going to go back to Nigel, and he's going to ask us a second question. So Nigel, over to you. And this is the question, guys. Who likes being sold to? Who likes being sold to? Be completely honest. Do you actually like being sold to? So let's get as many people as possible to answer this question. We've got sort of just about 100 now answered it. Unsurprisingly, of course, no is much higher than yes. Strangely, I quite like being sold to, because I want to try and identify what is it that people attempt to do in order to get me to say yes. But most people don't like being sold to. Look at it, the number now, it's getting up to 140 to 8, you know, so we're looking at a considerable margin of people who are saying, no, I don't like being sold to. Here's my second question then. What happens to you when you know someone is trying to sell you something? So just give us, this is like, you've now got to think through your reaction there. When you know someone is sort of overtly selling you something, how do you react? So look, what you're telling me is you become resistant, you distrust them, I want to kill them. Now, come on, this is not an anger management course here. You reluctant, switching off, you walk away, you get irritated, bored, you start doubting the person, you become suspicious, you get apprehensive, you reject whatever they're talking about, you close down, you become cynical and suspicious. Now look, I asked you just a question, which was an open question. What happens when we know someone's trying to sell us something? Every single one of those answers is what? Negative. Switch off, feel manipulated, get angry, disengage, feel resentful. All of those are negative reactions, are they not? So I think we can conclude this from that little survey. Most people do not like being sold to. And yet here is my contention. Everyone is open to influence. So let's have the slides back if we can, please, Nigel. Thank you so much. So what I want to focus on first is your current context and influencing challenges. And I want to pay particular attention to this first of all, which is the project cycle, the project triangle, if you like. Now, I think here's the reality. I am not a project manager, and I'm never going to be a project manager. Indeed, if anyone knows me well, they would say that's probably not a strength of mine. I have others around me, though, who are project managers, and I think it's a critical skill. I don't know, probably 85% of you are project managers who are listening now. You're probably aware of this project triangle, and so I'm not going to teach you all to suck eggs, but you are constantly under pressure from different sponsors and stakeholders that it's going to impact on the way you spend your time and the pressures on you to deliver a project on time, on budget, with the right level of quality. And there's going to be pushback against you in so many directions from so many people, both internally and externally in your organization. Am I not right? So your challenge is, within that context, is simply to ensure that you know how to influence in critical, what I call high stakes situations. So one of you in the survey said this: I've received feedback that I'm not assertive or authoritative enough when communicating. I asked you in the survey, who are you trying to influence? And you can see that this is what you told me. I'm not going to go through all those, but typically these are senior people, they're senior stakeholders, they are team members, customers, buyers. They can be executive leadership or senior people. You're having to influence the project steering group or other commercial people in your team. You're having to influence sponsors and stakeholders. You know who it is you've got to influence. So how confident are you in being able to do that effectively? And how capable are you in terms of influencing skills? So let's share this survey of 103 of you, which is a fair proportion of the 355 who have joined us today. So I asked, how confident do you feel in your ability to achieve your desired outcomes when in an influencing situation? And the average, the mean, was 5.7 out of 10. I asked the same question, but then linked it to competence, and it's pretty much the same figure, 5.6. So you're not scoring 7s, 8s, and 9s, which is maybe why there are so many people on this webinar, because you recognize that influencing is such a critical skill in your job as a project manager, or indeed any other job you're doing if you're not in the project management game. Now, often, I just got quickly something to say about confidence and competence. Often people feel more confident about something if they know they are competent, if they've got the capability. And so today we're going to be focusing on some very practical tools and ideas based around this model that I created 12 years ago with Tom Bird, who I write the books with, which will give you some practical ideas to ensure that you come across as an influential individual. Easy enough for me to say. Because the more you can get better at this stuff, the more you can become competent or capable, the more it will have a ricochet effect on your confidence. Do you see that? It's a bit like, when you learn to drive, for those of you who can drive perfectly well, the more you became better at it, the more confident you became. Except people who know me well, who know I can't drive at all. But that's a different matter. So, what are the specific high-stakes influencing situations that you face in your current role? This is just, 8 that you told me about. Take a look at them. I'm not going to go through all of these. Take a look at them yourselves. Does that resonate with you? You're having to get buy-in both to you and your proposals. And inevitably, there are going to be some things that get in the way. So let's identify some interferences. A chap called Tim Gallwey, who wrote a series of great books. If you've never read any Tim Gallwey books, I highly recommend them. Tim Gallwey, Gallwey, Tim Gallwey. And he wrote the Inner Game book. Some of you will be familiar with these. And in the inner game of skiing, he came up with this equation: performance equals potential minus interferences. And what he's suggesting here is that in an ideal world, our performance, what we do, our behavior and our skill, matches our potential for doing it. There's plenty of things that you do in your everyday professional and personal lives where you have a match between your performance and potential. I suspect, for example, on things like time management, I bet you a lot of you are really great time managers. You got here on time. If there is a mismatch between performance and potential, there must be, by definition, some sort of interference going on. And here are some of the interferences you identified for me in relation to the model I'm going to show you. So an interference is something that's stopping you becoming really effective. It's about mindset, capability, behavior. And you talked about in this survey things like self-doubt, negativity, resistance to change, lack of complete knowledge about something, reputational issues, and then the difficulties of communicating with different communication styles, different personalities, people who are over assertive with you. So I'm going to be focusing on making sure that we can meet some of these interferences and give you some sense of control, because I imagine control is important to you. And if I was knowing what I do about project management, I've got a fantastic project manager in my team called Ed Lamb, who's outstanding at this. He may or may not be listening. And, he helps me in my life to focus on a whole range of projects and a whole number of different things on a monthly basis. And so what I'm hearing from you, and what I know when I've spoken to him, is that you've got to win over people. You've got to, this is what someone said to me in the survey, you've got to become more amenable to others, especially in management. And the question there is, how do I get everyone believing in me and my ability? Quite, what a great question. So I'm going to give you some top tips, some practical tools about the foundations of effective influencing. You asked specifically about practical tools. You wanted something that matched both the face-to-face in-person world and the virtual world. In my view, we're entering a hybrid world where we're going to be, from May, June, living both in person and virtually in relation to how we're having to interact with people, making presentations, project briefings, and so forth. You wanted to find out more about how to gain commitment, making sure your voice is heard, and you want to know some specific techniques that you can use to influence others in an ethical way. So this is why I believe this is really right for you. Now let's start with a very basic question. What is influencing? Here's my definition of influencing. Influencing is about producing an effect on an individual or group by imperceptible or intangible means. Now that's quite interesting in itself, at least in my view, because underpinning that is this sense of imperceptible or intangible. A lot of influencing happens at an unconscious level. Would you agree with me that you can sometimes know that you have been influenced by someone, but you don't necessarily know how? We're going to be uncovering some of the how-tos of effective influencing, so you can take back much more control over your professional life. There are three key principles that underpin the model I'm going to show you. The first one is it's two-way. You've got to be open to being influenced. You can't just push influence on others, because if you are doing something that is too open and obvious, you'll be seen as manipulative anyway, and no one wants to be seen as manipulative. So the key to collaboration comes from the Latin collaborare, which means working together. If we want to work together, and by God, project management is all about working together, isn't it? We've got to be open to both. We want to be able to influence others and allow others to influence us. We may not be right about certain things, and we've got to problem solve together. The second key principle is pace, lead. The mistake a lot of people make is to try and lead too early, to try and get people to do what they want without having first paced. Now, what I mean by pacing is maintaining a rapport with another by joining them in their model of the world. So in order to influence effectively, you've got to pace the individual or the group. You might be trying to influence an individual, a key stakeholder or sponsor, maybe the project sponsor, or an external buyer, perhaps. You can't do that by just leading, in other words, pushing your ideas. You've got to first get in their shoes. That's about listening, matching and mirroring, which I'll come on to later, about really understanding their model of the world. And then the final principle is that the person with the greatest flexibility controls the system. This comes from systems thinking. And what I mean by that is that you can't just have one influencing style. Your job is to be able to be really flexible. If I was delivering this session for a bunch of 8-year-olds or 80-year-olds maybe, I would be doing it in a very different way, because they would require something different. So you've got to think about the audience, and you've got to think about, what can I do in my armory that allows me to be flexible and influence this particular individual or this particular group? Let's get on to the model. So the model is called the C-cubed model of influencing. Now, only 7% of you have heard about this, which means some of you have not read my book or books. Very disappointing. I didn't expect many of you to have heard of the model. However, I created it back in 2008. Let me give you a quick brief history of this. I was working in partnership with a chap called Tom Bird at that point, and Tom Bird and I still work together very, very closely. He now runs a gin business, but he does consultancy part-time and works with me on a number of different projects right now. And we had decided to write a business book. In fact, we had the idea of writing between 3 and 5. I'm just on the 5th at the moment. And we actually initially wanted to write a book on sales management, but it's a long story, but we didn't get that one published. We eventually got hired by Pearson to write a book called Brilliant Selling. We had no decision around that on the title, because it's part of the Brilliant series, which is a series of 42 titles, all called Brilliant. Brilliant communicating, brilliant influencing, brilliant selling, brilliant project management. Funny enough, Brilliant Project Management is the second best book in that series, just behind Brilliant Selling. And so what we wanted to do when we were writing the book is to do some primary research. So we got hold of about, I think it was 176 salespeople. They had to be really good at their jobs, because we wanted to speak to exemplars, people who are outstanding at selling. They had to be earning a minimum of 100 grand a year. This is back in 2008. They had to be in a business for at least 5 years and be very well thought of by their organization. And we did focus groups, individual conversations, one-to-ones, and we did a survey. And what we were trying to do is to identify what is that allowed these people to be so successful. Now, on the basis we've had this discussion already, most people don't like being sold to, over 90% of you. What is it that they were able to do that allowed them to be able to be so successful in an overtly sales role? And this is where this model came out of. So we wanted like a meta model that we could teach that would form the basis of part of the book. And we've also created a field guide, as Nigel said, which I'm giving away free to you. It's available on Amazon for $9.95. But just because I want to set up a reciprocity loop, more of that later, I'm giving it to you free. £9.95 worth coming your way after this webinar. So what is this model and how do we use it? So if you think about influencing, what we're suggesting with this model is that there are three core elements of influencing. First of all, if you want to be influential with a group or an individual, you have to be personally self-confident. If you think about this, if you ever notice someone who's nervous when they're presenting, what happens to you? You either dismiss the content or over-empathize with the presenter. But that person is not influencing well if they're obviously nervous. So in any situation, whether it's a remote meeting, an in-person meeting, a full presentation, or anything where the spotlight is on you, you have to be confident, because people are looking at you thinking, is this person confident? Am I going to buy into their idea or their service? So that's the first thing. The second thing is credibility. That comes from the Latin credo, which means I believe. You have got to be believable. So that comes from experience, knowledge, expertise, reputation. Those all contribute to credibility. And the final one is connection. When I started as a salesman with L'Oreal when I was 25, God, 31 years ago, almost. Yes, you're right, Nigel, my birthday is on Friday. My sales manager, a chap called Paul Flett, who ended up with a very big job with Warner Brothers over in the States, he said to me, all you have to do, Jeremy, is just become friends with the people you're trying to sell, and they'll buy off you. In those days, that was probably right. Nowadays, you need a little bit more of a level of sophistication. However, the connection piece is still really important. So if you want to influence a group as a project manager, you've got to be able to connect with the individual or the group, because that will help with trust. People buy people. You've heard that old expression. So you've got to be able to connect, build a rapport, which we'll focus on a little bit later. So does that make sense as a basic model? Now we've called it the C-cube model of influencing, and this is why we've done that. I'm hopeless at maths. I failed it 3 times at GCE level. I was hopeless at maths. However, even I know that if you give 3 to each of these 3 elements, confidence, credibility, and connection, if I put a number 3 for each, 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. Please tell me I'm correct. If you lack one of these things when you're influencing, either confidence, credibility, and connection, then let's say it's confidence, then you take away one of those elements, then you've only got 3 times 3, which is 9. So if you've got one of these elements missing, you're 2/3 less influential. Whereas if you've got all 3 things in place, you've got an exponential chance of being able to influence more people more of the time. So let's have a deep dive then into each of the core elements. Let's have a look first of all at confidence. Now, I don't know if this always makes me smile, this slide. What we know is this: when we're confident, we feel we can do anything, don't we? It's like there's nothing we can't do. And most of you will be confident most of the time in your job, I would suspect and hope. However, there are going to be times when, because confidence is situational, when maybe your confidence plummets. Maybe you lack a bit of confidence. For example, 67% of people have a fear of presenting. So when we looked at confidence in detail, we came up with this idea, which is that people have got that there are 2 elements of confidence: surface confidence and deep confidence. So surface confidence is all about having a few tactics and techniques that you can utilize and use in order to feel great in the moment. So when you're doing a presentation, a really important remote meeting, when you're having a negotiation around your pay, when you're having a challenging discussion with a client about some aspect of project work, you need to have a few ideas, which I'll share with you, to ensure that you feel good about yourself. And then deep confidence comes from mindset and deep practice. It comes from your mindset about yourself and your ability to change the world, change your environment, impact on a project. And basically confidence, as I indicated before, comes from deep practice. Sometimes thought of as the Gladwell's 10,000 hours. If you do 10,000 hours and get to genius level, you've done a fair amount of practice. Tiger Woods did that when he was aged 8, I think. Anyway, so those are the two elements. Now, as I've already indicated, if we think about it, 67% of people have, real issues or even a phobia of presenting, real fear. It's called glossophobia, the fear of presenting. That may be you. I deal with leaders and managers all the time and helping them with imposter syndrome, with deep fears around presenting. And it may be the same with you. So that's just an element of one element of an influencing situation, a high stakes influence situation that you may have to face. So how do you manage anxiety and present confidently? Let's have a look at some techniques so that you can appear confident and professional when you may be in a hot mess. I'm going to give you 3 techniques. There are plenty more, but we've only got a short webinar here. Breathe, look up, and power poses. So very simple, 3 simple ideas. And some of you will do these already. Some of you will have heard of some of these. Maybe you haven't heard of all 3 of them though. So just take your time and listen and note down anything that's practical and useful for you. The first thing I notice when people are not lacking, well, people are often lacking in confidence when they're in relation to handling meetings or presenting, is they're not breathing properly. They're upper body breathing. So we live in a pretty stressful world, tons of different things thrown at us on an everyday basis, having to hit deadlines, tough clients, you're bored, or your senior managers on at you all the time to make sure you hit your deadlines. It's tough sometimes, and we can become a bit stressed. Is that the case with you sometimes? Certainly is with me. So it's good sometimes just to take a moment and make sure you're breathing. So let's say before a big event, presentation, team meeting, discussion with a key project sponsor or stakeholder, something like that. Take some time out at your desk, or maybe even your bed if you're working from home, and breathe. And when I say breathe, I use the Hawaiian breathing technique, which is 7-7-7. In for 7 through my mouth, hold for 7, and then out for 7, going like this. And I do that for about 5 minutes. Typically what happens is I become more centered, more grounded. I did that before this webinar today. I'll do it anytime I need to just take a bit of time out and just come back to earth. So breathing can be a simple way, and those of you into yoga, Pilates, mindfulness, you'll know how important this is. You're already doing it. So just keep doing that, and you'll know that that really works. Here's the second thing, which not everyone will know about. But here's what I'd like you to do. I want you to think about a problem or issue that you've got right now. That is, don't choose the most important one, but choose an issue or a problem that you've got, a challenge that you've got in your professional life. Don't choose the most difficult one, but choose one that's right for you now. Do that in the next 5 seconds. Choose something that is a problem or a challenge. Okay, great. Now I want you to think of the problem or challenge, and I want you to look down like I'm doing now. Look down. And as you think about the problem or the challenge, notice what happens with you as you look down. Okay, snap out of it. And I want you to look up right if you're right-handed and look up left if you're left-handed. Can you smell popcorn? No, I don't think so. Good, excellent. So look up right if you're right-handed, look up left if you're left-handed, and I want you to think about the same problem, but now I'm right-handed, I'm going to look up right. And notice how you think about the problem. Now, I've no idea what your experience of that was, but for most people, when I do that live with people in a face-to-face keynote or something, then most people would agree that when they look down, they start getting more and more pissed off, annoyed, and frustrated with the problem or the challenge they've got. It gets worse. If they look up, the problem either goes away or they start seeing ways of handling it, ideas. So it's much better to look up. So if you want a simple little thing to do just for a meeting, a presentation, any sort of high stakes influencing situation, take a bit of time and look up into the corner of the room. Look up right if you're right-handed, look up left if you're left-handed. You're accessing the visual part of the cortex of your brain, and you're getting creative. And the third thing is this, power poses. Who's come across power poses before? I suspect some of you have heard of Amy Cuddy. My God, she's done the most widely watched TED Talks ever. I think it's about 17 million. She came up with this idea of power poses. There still will be some people out there who won't have heard of this. There are 5 different power poses. Here's an example of a power pose. Bolt winning the 2012 Olympics. Were you there? Some of you will have been. And essentially what Cuddy is saying is that she's a Harvard professor. She's interested in power dynamics in animals and leaders. And what she found was, through her research, was that through a simple saliva test, take a saliva test, hold a 2-minute pose, Superwoman, or this one. By the way, when someone crosses the line like that, blind runners do the same thing, so it's not learned behavior. And what happens is that over 2 minutes, when you have the saliva test done again, the power pose helps to decrease cortisol by 24% and increase testosterone, which is precisely what you want to feel in a highly resourceful state. So I use power poses, did today, and I use it for every big conference. So use a power pose. So those are 3 different ways, 3 different tactics that can help you with confidence. And the final thing is mindset. So I've already talked about that. You know, I had a very good friend, Andy Boyle, his name is. He works in consultancy recruitment, construction recruitment. And he was a lifelong smoker. He used to smoke 40 a day. I used to occasionally nab a few from him. And his wife then got pregnant. And I went round to his house, I don't know, 3 months or so before the child was going to be, no, 6 months before the child was going to be born, I think. And he wasn't smoking. And I said to him, why aren't you smoking? And he said, oh, I've stopped smoking. I said, why? He said, well, there's no way I can smoke around a child. It's totally unacceptable. So his mindset totally shifted. He used to love smoking. He was one of the great smokers of his generation. And yet, you know, he gave up just like that because his mindset changed. So deep confidence comes from mindset. If you think you're not a great presenter, or you think you're not a brilliant influencer, it doesn't come naturally, you will play that out in your life. A much stronger mindset is, I can learn this stuff about influencing and get better. That's a much better mindset. And the second way of becoming really influential in terms of confidence is deep practice. Just try some of these things out. Some of the things that I've taught you today, try them out and see if they work for you. So that's confidence. Let's have a look at the next one, which is credibility. Remember, credibility comes from the Latin credo, which means I believe. Credibility, or could be gravitas, that's what some organizations use in terms of their values. Experience, expertise, reputation, knowledge. Those are the bedrocks of credibility. And some of you out there will have got huge mountains of this stuff. Huge experience of delivering great projects globally, all around the UK, complex, ones that have taken years to do, I suspect. So we're going to go to Menti now. We're going to go to Nigel. I'm going to ask you this question about credibility. So Nigel, here's the question. The question is, what can you do that allows you to be more credible? So I just want some ideas here. I want you to share the ideas. Remember, you're going to get all this stuff. This is going to be shared to all 371 of you. So we've got 371 people with some ideas, hopefully. What can you do that allows you to be more credible? Great. Deliver results. Have a track record. That's about reputation. Do what you say you're going to do. Yeah. Don't overpromise and underdeliver. Training, show respect, continuing professional development. Yes, good. Do what you say you're going to do. Confident persona. Deliver a good job. Yeah, this is all about delivering, isn't it? A lot of what you're talking about. Be qualified. Yep, that helps. Get a certification. Give back. Lead by example. These are brilliant things. I love all this stuff. We'll share all this with you, and it's all great. Honesty. Be positive. Demonstrate success. Tell others. Yes, create case studies for those of you who are consultants, because that will help you with your credibility. Don't bullshit. Yeah, be authentic. If you don't know the answer, say so. Listen more. Keep promises. Prepare effectively for meetings. Brilliant. This is fantastic. Believe in yourself. Yes, why not? Why not start believing in yourself right now? Active listening, knowledge of subject. We could go on, but we can't. But thank you for that contribution. I really appreciate that. So let me snatch back the slides, please, Nigel. Thank you so much. So all those ideas are brilliant, guys. Thank you so much for contributing there and engaging with us here on this webinar for the PMI. And we will share all this stuff with you, so you'll get a spew of results, so that you've got all that for the future. I just want to share with you a couple of additional ideas. So that's all true, and in addition, I've got two ideas. The first one is this. I don't know about you, but I'm a long talker. That means I like chatting, I like talking. I was on Clubhouse yesterday for an hour, those of you who got onto Clubhouse. And it was great, I loved it. Just a few people asking questions and me getting on with it. I'm not so good at the bottom lining, but I have to get better at it because I've got to finish by 11:55. So how you do that through credibility is using the power of three. These are examples of the power of three. Most of you will have heard of this, but some of you may not have done. The power of three has this idea that if you can take all the ideas you've got for a project or for a particular presentation or a particular meeting and put them into a three, they're more likely to be memorable. All these things are memorable, aren't they? Government, you know, comedians use the power of three. It's used in sales and marketing. It's used in a whole range of different situations. So utilize the power of three and it'll help your credibility. A couple of ideas on attractors and detractors. Use the stuff on the left. Just have a look at those words on the left. Use those things. Say that linguistically. That will help underpin your credibility. And don't do the things on the right. Remember, you'll get all these slides, so you can go into them in more detail. But don't hedge. You know, have a point of view. If you over-smile too much, you'll come across as someone who's not credible. Stop apologizing for having a point of view or saying what you think. Too much humility. Humility is a good thing, but being too humble means that you lack credibility. And stop the we. That's great for and sometimes of course, if you're building collaboration, but also I. What do I think? Because you want to make your mark. So that is some stuff on credibility. Let's have a look at the next bit, connection. So again, over to you, Nigel. The question I've got here is, what can you do that allows you to build a connection with you when you are influencing others? So what can you do to build a connection when you are influencing others? So again, your ideas, please, ladies and gentlemen. Come up with some. Listen. First two ones are listening. What a surprise there. Yes, listen. Listening is so critical. Buy them lunch. Yes, bribery still works. Find common ground. Be authentic. Relate to them. Listening comes in a lot, and you know, sometimes we're not great listeners, are we? We can all get better at that, me included. Connect on LinkedIn, understand what's important to them, what's driving them, their values, exactly. Establish a point of empathy, ask good questions. These are all fantastic. Open body language, find something in common. Great. I'll have back the screen, please, Nigel. If we had more time, we'd go deeper into this, but we've only got 18 more minutes. And I need to hand back in 15 minutes. This is a project management session. I better not be late. Eh? So that's some stuff on connection. I want to add just one thing about on connection, which you know you may know about, and that's matching and mirroring. So if you want to influence at an unconscious level, then copy someone's body language, voice, or words. That can really help on the connection piece. Most people have heard of this idea of matching and mirroring. It comes from NLP, neuro-linguistic program, the art and science of what works in thinking, behavior, and mindset. And most people only match and mirror at a body language level. You can also do it through the voice. We'll come on to voice in just a second. But I want to pay attention to words. You can influence through words. Now, avoid using jargon. So I used to work for Walker Snack Foods as the training manager there, a UK training manager. And I was there once at a relaunch of Monster Munch. Remember, some of you remember Monster Munch in the UK? It's a snack, and it used to be really, really big snacks that they put into their packet, and they reduced the size of the snack. And this product manager, was standing up and going, "So it's great news today. We're going to reduce the size of the snack, which is going to increase the TTM." I sat there as the new training manager, knowing nothing about crisps and snacks. Thinking, what the hell does TTM mean? Anyway, up to Arsen and said, sorry, great presentation about Monster Munch, but what does TTM mean? He went, don't you know? Trips to mouth. Now, bizarrely, I didn't know what TTM means. You know, that was jargon. So avoid jargon because that mismatches people. But we had a pitch about 7 years ago when someone called in the office, and it was someone who was selling into the health service. It was a chairman of the board, and I had a initial rigorous or rigor. I handed it over to Tom. Tom wrote a proposal, and he used the word rigor or rigorous 9 times in the proposal. When Tom went to sell to him, at the end, he had our proposal on his desk with a marker over the words rigor and rigorous, because it was so important to him. We touched on one of his values. Now, rigor is something I suspect is very important with project managers. It's not a word I use very much, but so if you want to influence at an unconscious level, then you can do that linguistically by catch them so that they can see that you understand their model of the world. Okay, so we're now going to go on to voice, and I'm going to just touch on Cialdini, then I'll hand over to my friend Nigel. So look, we know about the voice, don't we? And the voice, especially if you think about this virtually, is more and more important, because you can't see the whole of me. You can only see the upper half of me. You can only see me occasionally using gestures. And body language virtually, therefore, is not as important. But when you're connecting or you're being credible, you can actually use your voice to underpin your influencing ability. And I'll show you how. So the key elements of the voice are pace, pitch, power, and pause. We all know that, not pose. That's Cuddy. So we all know that those are the 4 elements. Most of you, I suspect, will have traveled, but recently you would not have got on a plane. When you do go on a plane, when you enter the plane, the first person you'll often hear is the pilot. About 90% of pilots are male. Don't know why, but that's just a fact. And the voice you'll hear will be something like this. Good afternoon, everyone. It's Captain Castle here. We're going to be pushing back in approximately 25 minutes, and I'll be speaking to you regularly before we land in Johannesburg. Just for the moment, sit back, relax, and enjoy your flight. Have you heard someone speak like that before? I'm obviously slightly over-egging it here. And then you'll hear someone else talk, and they'll say something like this. Hi there, it's Head Steward Castle here. We've got a great crew with us today. We're going to be coming amongst you very shortly to serve you some breakfast. If there's anything you need at all, feel free to press the buzzer above you and we'll come and serve you. Have a great trip, or something like that. Even worse with Squeezy Jet. Now, did you notice any differences in the way I used my voice there? We're 47 minutes into this webinar. Are you still awake? Are you still focused? We've still got 370 people here. We haven't lost anyone, Nigel. This is good news. Hopefully, you noticed that I use my voice differently, and you can use your voice differently in order to push either your credibility or your connection. I'll show you how. So if you, obviously the pilot is the credible one, isn't he? I say he because 90% of pilots are male. Could be a female, of course. So if you want to be credible, knowledgeable, expert, pushing your reputation, demonstrating your experience, then what you do is this. You speak in a slow, deliberate way. You actually are quite monotone, so you don't use much variety in the voice. You utilize pauses. And in terms of inflection points, you go down at the end of the sentence or phrase. If you do want to use gesture, and some people use gestures a lot, then use palm down gestures. So you'll often see people who are politicians taught this stuff, they'll use palm down gestures. And if you say something that is particularly important, that you want everyone else to remember, dip your head as you say it, and at an unconscious level, you will saying to them, agree with me. So that's how to use the credible voice pattern. That makes sense? The opposite, of course, is with the connector. So if you want to be friendly with people, then use the exact opposite. Fast, variety, no pauses, up at the end of the sentence or phrase, palms up and head right up. Then you'll come across as a connector. So here's how you use them. The credible voice pattern, when you're really emphasizing key points, when you're saying, here's where we are in the project. This is what's happening right now. These are the core issues or challenges that we face in this particular project. Here's the information I need from you in order to hit this project on time and complete the project by the end of May. Use the credible voice pattern to emphasize the logical element of what you're talking about. If, however, you want to connect, because remember this, the connection is part of the CQ model of influencing. If you want to connect and build rapport with someone or a group, then use this voice pattern, because would you agree it's a sort of friendly voice pattern? So this is my normal voice pattern I'd use down in the pub. I've had to learn the credible voice pattern. So do that when you're asking questions, telling stories, including case studies or something like that, using humor. Those are all things you can use the connection voice pattern for. So there's a very specific thing here. It's all testable and learnable, but if you want to know how someone like an Obama is absolutely brilliant at being able to dip between credible and connector when he delivers a presentation. I know this is not about presenting, but it's an element of what you do as an example. There are plenty of people. Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand is brilliant at dipping between the two. The point is flexibility. Remember I said to you, the person with the most flexibility controls the system. You're starting to get that now? So if you can be flexible in the way you communicate via your voice, you will influence more people more of the time. I've got 5 minutes to go. And I want to just it's going to literally be an introduction because we haven't got enough time to go into it in a huge amount of detail. But that is the C-cube model of influencing: confidence, credibility, and connection. And I'm going to send you completely free the C-cube model of influencing field guide, which gives you a deeper dive into this model, and you can take some practical stuff out of it, which is much more than I can have covered in this webinar. Although, of course, we've got 30 minutes of bonus questions afterwards at 1 o'clock. So I wanted to introduce you to Cialdini's principles here. Only 11% of you had heard of Robert Cialdini. So, only one in 9 of you or so have heard of him. He was a professor. He's actually just retired, but he was a professor of psychology and marketing at Arizona State University. Okay, and he did tons of research. He had a massive research team that was able to underpin his thinking, and he was interested in this question: why do companies and individuals? What do companies and individuals do to get us to say yes? He was looking at it, and his book, which didn't really do anything for the first few years, but then it shot to fame. It's called Influence. It's a brilliant book. If you've never read this book, it came out I think in 1986, was it? 88, something like that. I'll just double check. You like precision, you are project managers. It came out in 84, actually, I was wrong. So Influence, brilliant book. And the first 6 of these all come from this book. Then the persuasion idea comes from this new book called Persuasion. So I just want to give you a little bit of a sense of this before I hand back over to Nigel. I can't go into these in big detail. So this is real introduction stuff to you, but hopefully you'll find it interesting. I'll pick out certain things. Reciprocity, because that's right at the top. This is really important. So in terms of how you influence individuals or groups, reciprocity is the desire to give back something that someone has done to us. So it's the practice of exchanging things. If I send you a Christmas card, you're more likely to send one back. He actually did a whole bit of research into this. He sent 280 Christmas cards to random people from Yellow Pages in the 1990s, and he got 112 responses from people he never met before, because of this idea of reciprocity. Why do you think free samples work in supermarkets? We feel the pressure to buy. We feel obligated to buy. Pan 10, which was launched by my mate Philip Jansen, who's now CEO of BT, it became the #1 shampoo within 3 months because it was given as a sample to every single household in the UK. If you get invited for dinner, do you not invite people back? So reciprocity is at the heart of influencing. Try it out. Social proof. What is it? It's people want to follow the lead of people just like them. So examples of things like TripAdvisor. Do you ever go and book a hotel or a holiday without looking at TripAdvisor? In hotels, the most successful one in a campaign to improve focus on the environment said the majority of guests who stay at our hotel recycle their towels at least once, and this increased compliance by 28%. Authority is a bit like credibility. Liking is a bit like connection. Scarcity is, we are attracted to things that are dwindling, are rare, uncommon features. So, limited edition cars, Rolexes, things that are only available for a short period of time, deals on Black Friday, Cloudy Bay Sauvignon Blanc. If anyone's got any, I want it. So if you can influence people if you can focus on scarcity as a key principle. And the final thing I want to introduce you to is persuasion. So I think this is really important, and it links to the last thing I'm going to ask you about. Persuasion is simply this is how Cialdini defined it: the process of arranging for recipients to be receptive to a message before they encounter it, strategically guiding preliminary attention to move prospects into an agreement with a message before they ever experience it. So what can you do before a meeting, before a presentation, before a pitch to get people on side? And Cialdini uses a farming analogy, and I think there isn't really a better one. Imagine throwing the best seed into any old ground. It's only going to grow if the soil is good enough to yield nutrients. Even still, the better the soil, the better the crop. No matter what soil you start with, you can work the ground to prepare for the soil for planting. So if your seed is the influencing message, the soil is the audience that will hear and see it. So persuasion is all stuff that you can do before an influencing event. Okay, so I'm going to pop back to Nigel, and I'm going to ask him to pop up the next Menti question, which is this one. What can you do to persuade? So just we've got some ideas right away. So pre-meeting, prepare well, issue slides with conclusion, inform, network, send contextual information beforehand. Great. PR, good. Meetings, issue slides, have one-to-ones. Yeah, basically lobby in advance. That is persuasion. That's why it works. Short comms ahead of time. You've got to tick off the why. Why should people be interested in this? You know, in your project. So those are great ideas. Leak information. Yeah, that is what governments do. You're absolutely right. Connect on LinkedIn. That's a really obvious thing to do. Pray. Yeah, you could do that if you wanted to, for those of a spiritual persuasion. Send information on time. Communicate the benefits. Yeah, that's the why. Send information on time. So lots of great ideas, all of which we will share with you as part of the package we'll send you afterwards. So Nigel, if you wouldn't mind just moving on to the final couple of slides, then I'll hand over to you. So look, thank you for being part of this, for engaging. Here's my belief. Business training doesn't work. That was the first line of my book, The Financial Times Guide to Business Training. And what I meant by that was this. Business training doesn't work unless you take action. Unless you take action, this is just simply a cognitive exercise. So all the stuff I've taught you is testable. Go out and test it in the real world and see if it works. I've also created an influencing planner that we're going to send you as part of a resource pack, so you can actually apply all this stuff into a current influencing situation for you. So look, thank you so much, guys, for paying attention. I'm going to be hanging around from 1 till 1:30 for half an hour to answer any questions you've got. Feel free to link in with me. Drop me an email, jeremy@jeremycastlecoaching.com. My email's on the slides, which you will receive. Thank you for engaging. You know, it's not perfect, this virtual stuff, but it's better than nothing, isn't it? And I really appreciate 370 people turning up to find out more about influencing. You now have some ideas about how to influence more people more of the time. Over to you, Nigel.
Jeremy, thank you for that. I've actually been practicing my power poses and my breathing and looking up, and I did actually wonder where you went 2 minutes before the webinar started, because it was just a completely blank screen, and that's exactly what you were doing. Excellent. Thank you for sharing all of that. We'll move on to Q&A in just a moment. First and foremost, I just wanted to bring up the agenda again, just to give you a brief resume of what we've covered this afternoon in terms of Jeremy's C³ model of influencing. I hope you found it, like I did, incredibly insightful, and I'm sure there's a lot of practical applications we can all put to what we've learned this afternoon. But to put that into real context, what I'd like to do now is just move on to a little bit of reflective practice. And for those of you that are familiar with the PMI UK webinars, we do like to ask this question at the end, just to see what it is that you're going to stop doing, what you're going to start doing, or maybe you're going to be doing differently. So if you can just spend a bit of time to share with us some of the things you've learned from this afternoon's webinar, that would be really, really useful. So I'm looking at what's coming in already. So use the techniques in pending interviews. Okay, so I think some of the things Jeremy mentioned with regard to voice, connection and credibility comes across big time in interviews, particularly the dip of the head looking for agreements, or actually when you want to be more personable and make connection. Probably useful to start at the beginning of the interview, get that rapport, that connection and that trust. That looks really great. Stop apologizing. Excellent. Certainly in a virtual presenting, the last thing you want to do is apologize for anything, because it just gives the essence that you're not in control of what you're actually doing. So again, working on voice, they're about NLP and mirroring in there. That's really good. Listen better, look up. I think Amy Cuddy is going to get a few more hits, Jeremy, on the TED Talks website. I know I've seen it a few times, and it does actually work. I spoke to Jeremy earlier. I said on my vision board at home, I actually got a picture of Eric Cantona doing his famous pose from a goal he scored in the 1990s, which works for me. So what else do we have? We have practice, practice, practice. Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours. Excellent. And I don't actually think that practice doesn't make perfect, but I think what it does do, because perfect doesn't exist, practice does make permanence. And I think that's a real key distinction. So thank you everyone for sharing that. I do want to move on because I just got a final question just before we end formally at 1 p.m. But just in terms of what you've heard, do you believe you've now got some tools that can enable you to influence more effectively? So I think we've got a statistically significant approval rate here, Jeremy, very high. That's looking pretty good. Thank you for that. I just want to do a few closeout messages just before we move on to the extended, what we call after-party Q&A, where you can share all your questions with Jeremy. We'll have some fun with some of the answers. Jeremy referred to his influencing planner. Now, if you refer to the handouts tab on your GoToWebinar dashboard, you'll see a couple of handouts there. One is one of Jeremy's gifts, his influencing planner. Another is a handout showing you upcoming quality webinars from the guys here at PMI UK. So please take time to read, digest, download, and of course, register for future events. The PDU code should be contained within a survey link, which credentialing members should see in the chat in the GoToWebinar dashboard. And as I said at the start, all of the material that we're using today, so the video and the slideware and all the references that Jeremy's made available to us, resources, including his free ebook on the CQ field guide, will be made available to all registered attendees to the email that you provided during registration. And finally, and I'm really glad that Jeremy said to me earlier that A, he wasn't a project manager, and B, he wasn't very good at maths. Well, he's actually passed the first test pretty well, because he said to me he would hand over at 12:57 UK time, which he actually did. But the next bit on the maths is a little bit incalculable, because Jeremy has kindly given people from PMI UK and guests a 50% discount offer on his virtual presenting video course, where he'll go into a lot more detail about some of the themes he's introduced today. Now, I'm not great at maths, but I know that from 449 down to 100 is more like 75%. But whichever way you look at it, it's a really, really great offer. And if you want to take advantage of that with Jeremy, then the details are there on the bottom of the screen. And of course, they'll be available to you in the post-event communication that we send out. So if that's of interest and you want to learn more about what Jeremy touched on today, in particular on presenting skills, then this could be the course for you. And now, actually, Jeremy, if you want to open up your video again, I think we've got a whole bunch of questions, and I trust, Jeremy, you can see the screen at the moment, so we're just going to take them one by one, and we've still got over 250 people still on the line, so there's still a lot of interest in the subject. So, well, question number one.
260 actually, so look, hang around if you can. I appreciate some of you will have to disappear for lunch or go off for another commitment, but thanks a lot for hanging around. I appreciate that. So look, Penny, first of all, if you're lacking in one of the C's, e.g. confidence, can you compensate for the other two? Well, if you remember, Penny, what I said was 3 times 3 times 3, so you're 2/3 less likely, so you've got to pay attention to the others. But basically, that's what people do. They compensate. So I work a lot with professional service firms, Penny, and they are very great at at credibility, and they push credibility, but they're not so good at connection often. And so that's the thing they lack. And it's, you know, not until I necessarily work with them or their teams that when I show them this stuff, that they realize actually we've got to get better at connecting, staying in touch with our clients, for example. So whichever one of the areas you've got a deficiency in, Penny, or others who like this question, you can't actually compensate. You just got to get better at the other one. So you've got to find ways of if it's confidence, because you said e.g. confidence, I'm assuming that's the one where you might have an issue, Penny, but I'm only assuming that, then that's what you've got to work on, you know, because I suspect confidence is situational. You're confident in a lot of situations, probably 98%, but there might be certain ones where you lack confidence. So my question to you, and if I was coaching and working with you directly, would be, what options have you got? What else could you do that would allow you to be more confident? And I would just then teach you certain things like the power poses, breathing, looking up, there's lots of others as well, that can allow you to be confident, because it's not something, you know, everyone, if I said to you now, Penny, think of a time when you were confident, I'd be pretty sure that you would remember a time in your life that you were confident. So it's not like that you can't be confident, it's just a question you're lacking confidence in the moment. And as I said, the thing that often links confidence is competence. So if you want to get better at something, test it out and practice it. You know, I used to do 2 or 3 webinars a year up until March last year. I now do 2 or 3 a week, and I've got better at them because, you know, I've had to because otherwise I would have gone bust. So, you know, you can get better at these things. I hope I've answered that question for you, Penny. Do you think strong accents affect the voice pattern credibility from a Scouser? That's a real risk question. That's a banana skin question, isn't it? Whatever I say is going to be the wrong answer in some respects. But thank you. No, I mean, personally, I think authenticity is really important. And although some people might have bias, and this is not a session on bias, you know, you've all heard of unconscious bias. So there might be unconscious bias going on in terms of regional accents, different countries and so forth. No. We sometimes can accuse, let's say, Australians, I don't know if there are any Australians in the crowd, of lacking credibility because they often go up at the end of the sentence or phrase, don't they? So that's what it's like. And that can sometimes reduce our belief in their own credibility. But I don't think strong accents do have that impact. What you've got to do is be flexible. Your accent is your accent. You know, I don't really have an accent. I've got like received accent, if you like, whatever it's called. And many of you will have accents. However, you're not going to go to elocution lessons, so that you're stuck with whatever you've got, and you've got to make the most of it, because the issue is that a lot of people don't like their voice, actually, which is why they don't like listening to recordings of them, or the recording on their voicemail or something. There's nothing you can do about it, so you've got to make the most of it. Even if you've got a strong accent, you can still distinguish between connection and credible, so you can slow it down, speed it up as required, and all those subtleties I introduced. So my simple answer to that question from a Scouser is no. My listening and ready to compromise read. Will my listening and ready to compromise be a read as a lack of confidence? What do I do wrong? I think I understand that. Let's sort of yeah, I think so. So what you're saying is, if I overcompensate and do too much of the connection piece, will it look as though I'm less credible and lacking confidence? I think that's what you're asking there. The answer is no to that. So when I have to sell, because I run a consultancy. So we're in the middle of a pitch actually for some work with a Spanish consultancy who are connected with Microsoft, and we've got a pitch on Wednesday, next Monday, and we're just developing the pitch proposal right now. But we spent most of our 2 meetings, we spent 3 hours with this group of senior people. We spent most of that time listening, not talking. And I don't think it's reduced our credibility or our confidence, because we were at that point in a listening mode, because you can't produce a proposal for a client unless you're listening carefully to patterns, to what they want, both what they think they want and what they need, and before you can come up with a sensible proposal. So I don't think it does necessarily reduce your your credibility or confidence. What I think is important, though, in a different context, let's say if you're in a, let's say you're more of an introvert and you're in a room of extroverts, or you find it difficult to get your word in, and that might be an issue. So everyone thinks she's quiet or he doesn't say much, whatever. Then one of the things you can do in terms of persuasion is to send something to that group which can engage and benefit them, or have something ready to say early doors. So you know what the subject matter is, you know what the discussion is, have something to say that's going to be of value to people, and get in there early and say it early so that your voice is heard in the room, virtual room or in-person room, early, and that will tick the credible voice, and then you can go back to doing more of your listening and connecting. So I'm hoping that's answered the question. That was anonymized. I don't know who wrote that. Can you influence through copying, mirroring, while still being authentic and credible? Yes, that's good. So it's a really good question, and one that often comes up with anything to do with NLP, which hasn't got a good name now. I learned it in the early 2000s. I still think it's great in terms of some of the models and tools that I learned. I still use on an everyday basis. I think it's brilliant. However, there is this whole thing about manipulation and authenticity. So, you know, so behind that question is this thing about manipulation, I think. And my answer to that is this. And I learned this from Robert Dilts. Robert Dilts, some of you may have heard of, said this. He said, you know, if you think about a knife and fork, most people possess a knife and fork. You can use a knife and fork to allow you to eat, you know, so you can move the food from the fork to your mouth. So it can be used for that, and we all use that every day. But both those instruments could be used to kill someone. So it depends on what your intention is. And so you can use all these techniques, any influencing technique, and it could be seen as manipulative. But my view is that if your intention is right, so if you're not deliberately trying to pull the wool over someone's eyes, or be deliberately manipulative, or lie, be dishonest, all those sorts of things. If you're just trying to get what you want or what you believe is right for the project and influence in an ethical way, I think you should be able to do whatever you want. I can still copy someone and be authentic. So someone called me the other day. I'm doing some work with an American woman, and she's my coachee. She's very, very busy, and she called up and it was something like this. It was, oh, hi there, Jeremy. Look, I've only got about half an hour today. I've got tons of things I've got to do. She spoke incredibly fast. So it's like, what do I do there? Do I go, no, look, could you please, Sheila, could you just please calm down, because you seem to be very, you know, very stressed at the moment. Please just slow down and calm down. You know, if you do that, you're going to irritate someone, because not many people like being told what to do, as I keep reminding my wife. So, so no, I didn't do that. I did this. I went, oh, hi there, Sheila. Yes. So you only got a few minutes. So let's just think about carefully. What do you want to achieve from this next 30 minutes? So that's copying her voice pattern. And I then gradually paced her. Remember, pace, lead. I gradually, over the course of 3 or 4 minutes, slow down my pace of my voice in order to get her into a calmer place. So I copied there, but I was still authentic. And my intention, my outcome there is to serve her, to help to ensure that she gets some benefit from that half-an-hour coaching call. So I'm hoping that answers the question around copying, mirroring, and still being authentic and credible. What would be the first step? It's really odd not seeing faces, by the way. That's a bit off-putting for anyone who does this sort of thing, but it's just the way it is. What would be the first step to break into an in-group if you're not seen as an obvious member? That's a good question. So I'm suspecting that's something that's very personal to whoever asked that question. What would be the first step to break into an in-group if you're not seen as an obvious member? Yeah, so if I was dealing with, if that was the question that someone was there, I'd be saying, well, what options do you have? What could you do? The assumption behind the question is you do want to break into that in-group, but there's also an in-group, and you know, somehow that they're a cabal or something. So you could lobby in advance or pick off one of the members, you know, so rather than trying to get into the whole group, what can you do to, who's the person you think is the most influential, or who's the person that you have some sort of relationship with where you can start with them? So I would focus on the individuals, I think. Other than that, think about what can I add value to this group? How can I add value to this group so that they can start seeing me in a different light? Am I able to send them something? am I able to create something for them? Can I share something with them that they can think, oh, great, this person is credible or can add value here, and then you might be, be seen as part of the in group. Although, was it Marx, Groucho Marx said, I never want to be a member of a club that allows me in as a member, or something like that. So, I don't know whether you necessarily want to be always breaking into an in group, and maybe there's a question mark about that, but hopefully that's given you a couple of ideas. So pick them off, possibly. That's an idea. No, I don't know what no means. What's that? No, that's just something else. Okay.
I just thought I'd pop up, Jeremy, as the token question asker, because I know what it's like in these virtual situations, not seeing another face. So if we're pitching an idea where more people would be opposed to it, as it involves a big change, then providing information in advance can bring resistance. How can you persuade in such a scenario?
Oh, that's a really good question. I really like that question because it's quite a complex question. I like that. If we're pitching an idea where more people will be opposed to it as it involves big change and provide, So think about this. Most people don't like change. Change, a lot of you will be familiar with the change curve. We haven't got time to go into that, but obviously what you get often is resistance before acceptance. So what you've got to do there, I think, is you've got to think, what are the reasons why people would not be open to this change? And what are the natural benefits of them taking the change? Basically, people are only motivated to take action for two reasons: to get away from pain or go towards pleasure. In NLP terms, they're called meta programs, towards and away from. Okay, those are the two major things. So any sales or marketing is always about moving towards something that looks wonderful and shiny, or moving away from something which is painful. Okay, so in this situation, I think what you've got to do is to think, what information can I do that's going to hit in the why of the resistance? Why are they resisting? I would also be thinking about picking them off and lobbying in advance by calling them and going, here's what I'm proposing. It probably is quite a big change. Why would it not work? What do you think might be some of the reasons why this could work? What would I need to do? I'm just asking for you because you're a big fish here, or you're important. What do you think I should do in order to ensure that this change works within the organization? So lobby in advance, put yourself in the other party's shoes, think through the change process. That will give you some better ideas about persuasion in such a scenario, I think.
Great, thanks, Jeremy. How can I stop rambling in meetings and interviews?
Just stop. Next question. No. Good question. How can I stop? So there's some real self-awareness there that you are prone to rambling. Now, whoever asked that question, I am part of the rambling club. Okay. Seriously, if you ask my wife, Susie, she would say I'm a long talker. So there's a distinction between a long talker and a bottom liner. I've come up with these sort of little simple definitions. A long talker talks around a subject. He or she likes the sound of their own voice. They don't even know what they think or feel about something until they start talking. They're very auditory in terms of the way they think. So they will tend to be seen as ramblers in meetings. There are other people who what I call bottom liners. And bottom liners are people who are just able to get to the nub of something, just like that, and just go, well, it's this and this. Well, it's quite obvious. That's what you should do. Leave him. They will have a definite, my friend I talked to you about, Andy, he's definitely a bottom liner. He will never ramble about something. He'll just go, well, stop it, or do something else, or, he'll have an instant judgment about something. So what you're talking about here is a preference. And if you know you have a tendency to ramble, I would start thinking about using the power of three, because the power of three allows you to think, what are my three key things I want to say here? And give you a methodology to put your ideas into a little model. So just say, so when someone asks you a question, you can say, well, I think there are three core issues that we need to address in order to move this project forward. They are A, B, and C. John, do you agree with that? And that's a much more succinct way of doing it. And if you do that more often, you'll stop either thinking yourself a rambler, or maybe other people will stop thinking you're a rambler.
And just to add to that, Jeremy, from my own experience, certainly in an interview situation, the interviewer will tell you when you're rambling too much, because they'll just cut to the chase for you. So,
very good point. And I've actually worked with 4 young people recently who have been contacted through their parents who wanted my help for them to be interviewed by robots, basically, because in order to get an internship now, if you want to get into an internship with an investment bank, you've got to go through the first sort of wave is to be interviewed by a machine, where you've got half an hour to answer 7 random questions that are generated by the machine. And if you don't answer them correctly and get through that through a certain algorithm in terms of where you answer it, you don't get through to the next stage where you meet human beings. So there you do, Nigel, you're absolutely right, have to stick to answering a question in a maximum of 60 seconds or something.
bit
Okay,
like
next
those
question.
Autobots as well, isn't it, on those
Yeah,
help
I know.
stuff?
It's appalling,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, it's the world we live in. It's the negative
Next question. We've
impact.
got tons to get through. We've just got 10 minutes to go. So how do you influence others when they have more experience and knowledge?
Yeah, so we've still got 157 people on the call, which is, you know, really fantastic. That's about half of the people who started out. Really appreciate you hanging on here. Thank you. I don't know whether you're having lunch, just listening in the background, or really paying attention, but thank you for hanging around. I appreciate that.
PTM.
How do you influence others when they have more experience and knowledge? Yeah, that's a great question, because I'm assuming, therefore, that the person asking that believes they don't have sufficient experience and knowledge. And of course, some of you might be starting out. You might be junior project managers, sorry. And you know, if you're, I don't know, let's say in your 20s, and you're having to deal with people who are sponsors and stakeholders who are in their 50s and 60s, believe me, at some point you'll be that age. Then you've got a real distinction between your age and the others. I think that's a really good question. I'm just trying to think about the best way of answering that. You still have some experience and knowledge. That's the first thing to say. So despite the fact that you might have only been doing the job for a year or so, you can play on that, and you can say things like, you know, well, what I've noticed in a short period of time is this and this. You can also do research and find stuff out. And actually, you'll probably be, if you're in the younger generation, perhaps, you'll be able to get access to knowledge more easily, and you'll be more open to it than, say, people from, you know, who are 20, 30 years older than you. So maybe you can find some insightful stuff and write a white paper, or write something, you know, a blog or something, which can push your experience and knowledge. You can also play back the other person's experience and knowledge and piggyback on it. So you can do things like, you know, you can say, so Sue, you've got a lot of expertise in this because you've been doing it for the last 10 years. You know, what do you think are the key issues here? And the person will then say something. You'll go, great, thank you, thanks a lot for sharing that with me. I think that's really helpful. And you know, I think all those things are right. And there's one other thing that I can perhaps add in here, and it's this. And then you just add in a little bit, so you're building a lot of connection because people like talking about themselves and their own experience, and you're also adding some stuff in that might be helpful. That's a really good question.
Just to add to that, Jeremy, I sort of dumb it down quite a lot in those certain situations, certainly the early part of my career. And I would talk about connectors to get rapport, like football teams or the weather, or something that's just general, which maybe, you know, they've got an interest in, which is a great way of a lead-in just to get a conversation going.
Yeah, identify common ground and play with it. Yeah, good. Yeah, thank you, Nigel.
No worries. Do you get the usual bell curve in your survey about confidence and capability scores, or was it skewed?
Did you get the, okay, I see what you mean. That's a good question. I'm just actually trying to think about that, whether it was a bell curve or not. It was quite a long time ago now, so I don't have the data, because it was like 12 years ago we did the research, really. So actually, that's a question I can't genuinely answer sensibly. What we did was, in terms of coming up with a model, because we didn't have a definite model, of course, we were trying to look up actually it's confidence, credibility, and connection there. Oh no, actually, oh, sorry, this must be in our survey, in the survey that I think that's what you talk about there. I haven't gone into detail about that. I just took a mean. So I just asked that question 1 to 10, and that was the mean. So that's the answer to that question.
Okay, thank you. Great comment, great feedback. Thank you. Oops, something went wrong. Can you transfer any of the C's to members of your team, especially when they represent you?
How can you transfer any of them? Or give them a credibility pill or a connection?
It just sounds like an inside job on all three, really. It's got to come from within. It's the way I would see it.
Well, I think I mean, you won't be surprised whoever asked that question. What you need to do is hire me, and I'll teach it to your team. But now you've got the model. It is actually a trademark model. So if you are going to use it for training internally, just tell me, because I think that's just respect. Because it's a trademark model, and I'm not going to go after you, but you know what I mean. But so either hire me, and I can do that, or train your team in it. Because if this is new to most of you, and whatever it was, 97% of people had not heard of the C-Cube model of influencing. It's only our model. It's only one map of the world, but I think it's quite useful. The thing to do is to train it to people, share it with people, and note. You can start also, if you're a manager or a leader, you can start noticing, where is someone potentially deficient? Where do they need help with? You know, is it confidence? Is it credibility, or is it connection? What is the one thing that you're noticing that they lack that diminishes their influencing skills? Because if you can nail what that is, and you can maybe you could do it in coaching as well. For those of you who are coaches, trained coaches, or use coaching as a management tool, then you can sit down with them, share the model, which is the mentoring bit, and then say, what do you think about the model? Where do you think your strengths are? Where do you believe you still got areas for development? How can I help you? What do you need from me? What do you need from the rest of the team? What would need to happen for you to move your confidence from a 4 to an 8? You know, and then you're starting to have a genuine adult to adult conversation, which allows someone to come up with their own development plan. And then, of course, if that happens, they'll be much more motivated to actually then go and do something about it. So that's a really good question. You can't transfer it. In other words, if you just send the slides and say, read these, and then you become more influential, that will not work, okay? Because knowledge is not power in that situation. They've got to buy into it. They've got to understand the why. And that's why you, as a leader or manager, have such an important part to play in the transference of knowledge or the embedding of new capabilities or behaviors.
And I'm guessing as well, Jeremy, a lot of that knowledge is going to be contained in the field guide ebook that you're going to give to everyone.
Yes, absolutely. It's a deep dive. So tons of info in there, and there's lots of little exercises. There are exercises that you can do as individuals or as teams.
Excellent, that's great. I'm just conscious of the time here, Jeremy. You've got 3 minutes to go. You've got 22 questions left. How do you want to handle the outstanding stuff?
Well, look, I'm going to throw over. I'm happy to finish off 2 or 3. You know, whatever you think are the right ones. I'm going to take responsibility. I'm going to ask you to take responsibility for these. We've got something like 20 odd questions. They're not necessarily odd questions, but you know what I mean, left, which I'm not going to be able to complete by 1:30. I'm going to ask you to do this. If you want that question answered, then I will answer it, but I want you to take responsibility by emailing me. So it's on the slides, but just grab a bit of paper if you haven't got your question answered yet. Jeremy, Jeremy, Jeremy at Jeremy Castle, CASSELL, coaching, COACHING.com. Jeremy at jeremycastlecoaching.com. It won't go into a junk. I always check that every day. And just send me, just say, you know, I was on the PMI webinar. Here's my question, and I promise you, I will get back to you. Not till 2024. No, I promise you, I will get back to you at some point before the. I'll promise to get back to you by the end of the week. Is that fair enough? I got my birthday on Friday. So
on your birthday? Well, that's really.
But I'll try to get by end of tomorrow. So send me the email. I will. In other words, you take responsibility for it and send me the email, and I will respond if you bother sending it to me.
Okay. So
and all of those who are still out there, 128. Please feel free to link in with me. You know, that's an obvious way to start connections. I put a video up every single week on LinkedIn about some aspect of presenting, influencing, or selling. So to link in with me, please. Right, time for what? 2 more questions, you think?
let's contract. Let's do 2 more questions, and I just do need to do a final closeout. So let's move on to what's the best way to enhance your voice? I have a naturally quiet voice and often get lost when speaking, even after pre-work with stakeholders and meeting attendees.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm sorry you feel like that. 95% of people I ever work with don't like their voice. So you may or may not like my voice, but I'm not going around thinking I've got the most extraordinary voice. Most people, when I do presentation coaching, and it's either in person or now virtually, almost everyone will say, God, I hate my voice. I don't like my voice for this reason or that reason. It seems to be almost a universal thing. The first thing you can do is actually identify, how does your voice really sound? If you put your hands behind your ears and you push your ears forward and start speaking, that's how other people hear you. The other thing to do is to record yourself and listen to yourself speaking and try and be objective. Don't be just subjective of your voice, and then ask other people about how they think of your voice and ask descriptors from them. And you might find a dissonance between your view and their view. In other words, they might think your voice is great. If you do, however, believe, and you've had feedback and you honestly believe that your voice is very quiet, then you essentially, it's difficult for me to explain precisely now. Drop me an email about this, but basically it's all about diaphragmatic breathing and using your voice box in a slightly better way. And it does require some practice. You've basically got to go up by 20-25% to make yourself heard. And often a voice like that gets stuck in the throat because they're not diaphragmatically breathing and they're speaking too much from here, which, so there can be a number of reasons for that, but it is quite possible to learn how to speak loudly and to get feedback so that you can move your voice to the next stage.
Thank you. And the final question this afternoon, hostile peer group of culturally united team up against a leader who has been brought in from the fringe or outside. Colonel Ravi Kumar.
That doesn't look like a question to me. It looks like a statement of intent. Hostile peer group of culturally united team. Hostile peer group of culturally united team up against a leader who's been brought in from the fringe or outside. I don't really know what that means, okay. And it's not a question. But if the question is how do you develop rapport with a hostile group, you either keep them as enemies and keep them at your, you can't get on with everyone in business. There are always going to be people you don't like in business, or you find ways of increasing connection in some way. So again, you pick people off, or you add value in some way, or it's a mindset thing. You're thinking they're hostile, but actually, are they hostile? Are they just defensive for some reason? But it's difficult, Colonel Ravi Kumar, to know precisely what it's about because it's not a question. But I think I would be focusing on am I right about this group being hostile? What options do I have that are in my control that I could do something about that will change the dynamic between me and this group?
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. I think we're going to leave it there. Everyone, please take up Jeremy's offer to email him. His contact details will be in the slide deck you'll see post-event. But I just want to say that I've been Nigel Smith. I've been your host today. I really do want to thank each and every one of you that stayed on for this duration, and of course to Jeremy himself for the preparation that's gone into this event today. I really think that he's prepared for the audience from your input and has spoken to you in a way that you guys understand. So thank you, Jeremy, for that. I also want to extend my thanks to the back office team of PMI UK, in particular, Carla Miranda, Jodie Walker and Adebayo Spencer, for doing all the background tasks and making sure that what the library web page is going to be up this evening. You guys are going to get the email with all the links and the free e-copy of Jeremy's book, all in one neatly packaged email a little later on. And just before we do go, Jeremy, is there one final thing that you want to leave people with today?
Yes, there is. You can improve your ability to influence more people more of the time. What you've got to do is go out and test these things. So spend 30 seconds reflecting at some point today and tomorrow, identify your key learning points, and then take action.
Excellent. And thank you so much, Jerry. Thank you for your time today. I'm sure everyone's truly appreciative of your efforts, and see everybody next time. Thank you.
It was a
Goodbye.
pleasure, Nigel. Thanks for having me on, mate. Take
Are
care,
you welcome?
everyone. Cheers now.
Cheers.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Catch you soon, I hope. Cheers. Bye-bye.